April 17th, 1943, North Atlantic, 620 miles west of Ireland. Lieutenant Commander James Harwell stood on the bridge of USS Borie, his gloved hand gripping the compass binnacle as the destroyer pitched through 15-foot swells. The needle swung wildly, 20 degrees off, then back, then spinning lazily like it had all the time in the world. His executive officer, Lieutenant Charles Hutchins, watched the commander's jaw tighten. "Sir, we're heading 270 magnetic, but the gyro's reading 255. It's been drifting for the last hour." Harwell looked down at the chart table. Their assigned patrol sector was northeast. The convoy they were supposed to be screening was 70 miles behind them now, steaming toward Britain with 38 merchant ships carrying fuel, ammunition, and aircraft. And Borie was heading west, away from the convoy, away from their station. The smart play was to turn around, report the malfunction, rejoin the screen before some staff officer in a warm office started asking questions about why a destroyer had wandered off station during the height of the Wolfpack season. But something in the back of Harwell's mind whispered that the compass wasn't entirely wrong. The deviation was too consistent, too deliberate, like the ship herself was pulling toward something. "Maintain course," he said quietly. Hutchins stared at him. "Sir?" "Maintain course, XO, and sound general quarters." What Commander Harwell couldn't have known was that his malfunctioning compass was leading him directly toward the largest concentration of U-boats in the North Atlantic, and that the next 6 hours would become one of the most studied anti-submarine engagements of the entire war. By April 1943, the Battle of the Atlantic had reached its most desperate phase. German U-boats were sinking Allied merchantmen faster than shipyards could replace them. In March alone, 108 ships, totaling 627,000 tons, had gone to the bottom. Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of the U-boat fleet, had deployed 43 submarines in a massive patrol line codenamed Gruppe Meise, stretching 600 miles across the convoy routes between Newfoundland and Britain. The Wolfpack tactic had evolved into a science of coordinated murder. U-boats would shadow convoys just beyond radar range, radioing position reports to headquarters in Lorient. When enough submarines concentrated, they would strike at night, firing spreads of torpedoes into the packed merchant columns. Escorts would race toward one attacker while 3 others slipped through the gaps. The mathematics were brutally simple. There weren't enough destroyers to protect every ship. USS Borie was a Clemson-class destroyer, commissioned in 1920 and obsolete by any reasonable standard. Her 4-inch guns were World War I vintage. Her top speed of 32 knots had degraded to 28 after 2 decades of hard service. She carried 56 depth charges and a crew of 150 men who knew exactly how outmatched they were against modern Type 9 U-boats that could dive to 750 feet and cruise submerged for 80 miles. The statistics backed up their anxiety. In the first 4 months of 1943, U-boats had sunk 203 Allied ships. Escort vessels had destroyed only 15 submarines. The kill ratio was running 13-1 in Germany's favor. Merchant seamen had a higher casualty rate than any other Allied service. 1 in 4 would die at sea. Destroyer crews knew that finding a U-boat meant getting close enough for depth charges, close enough that a well-aimed torpedo could break their ship in half. What made the Wolfpack particularly devastating was its patience. U-boats would trail a convoy for days, calling in reinforcements, waiting for weather or fatigue to create an opening. German submariners called it the tonnage war. It didn't matter if you sank warships or freighters, only that you sank more than the Allies could build. Commander Harwell had been at sea for 19 months. He'd heard torpedoes detonate against merchant hulls in the darkness. He'd watched oil fires burn on the surface while men screamed in the water. He'd dropped depth charges over suspected contacts that turned out to be whales, temperature layers, or nothing at all. Every ping from the sonar was a possibility. Every contact was a decision measured in seconds. The North Atlantic in April was a gray hell of 30-degree water and 40-knot winds. Visibility dropped to a quarter mile in rain squalls. Sonar performance degraded in rough seas as wave action created false echoes and turbulent, scattered sound waves. U-boats exploited the weather, surfacing in storms to recharge batteries and transmit reports, knowing that radar and lookouts were nearly useless. For destroyer captains, the tactical problem was maddening. You needed to be fast enough to chase down contacts, but close enough to the convoy to respond to attacks. You needed to maintain sonar contact while maneuvering for depth charge runs, but violent turns disrupted the sound beam. You needed to be aggressive enough to kill submarines, but conservative enough not to abandon your station. Borie had been assigned to Escort Group A3, screening convoy HX-234, 38 ships in 9 columns, each column 600 yards apart, the entire formation covering 4 square miles of ocean, 6 escorts, 3 destroyers, 2 corvettes, and 1 Coast Guard cutter. 6 escorts for 38 ships spread across water where 40 U-boats were hunting. The doctrine was clear. Stay with the convoy. Don't chase contacts beyond the screen. Don't leave gaps that submarines could exploit. The mission wasn't to sink U-boats. The mission was to get the convoy through, and then Borie's compass started lying. Kapitän Lieutenant Heinrich Schroeder commanded U-403, a Type 7C submarine operating with WWII. From his perspective, 150 feet beneath the surface, the tactical situation looked nearly perfect. Radio intercepts indicated that convoy HX-234 had only light escort, destroyer strength, not a proper support group with escort carriers and dedicated hunter-killer teams. Intelligence from B-Dienst, the German Naval Cryptanalysis Service, had broken enough Allied naval codes to give Wolfpack commanders a decisive advantage. Schroeder's war diary, recovered after his capture later in 1943, recorded his assessment. Enemy escort doctrine remains predictable. Destroyers will not pursue beyond 10 kilometers from convoy center. They are reactive, not offensive. We own the initiative. The Germans had reason for confidence. Their acoustic homing torpedoes, the T-5 Zaunkönig, were entering service. The Schnorkel ventilation system would soon allow U-boats to run diesel engines while submerged, eliminating the need to surface for battery charging. New radar detectors gave 20 minutes warning before Allied aircraft arrived. The technological race was tilting toward the submarines. What German commanders didn't fully appreciate was how desperately the Allies needed a victory. Convoy losses in March had triggered emergency meetings in Washington and London. Churchill had written to Roosevelt that the Battle of the Atlantic was the dominating factor all through the war. Never for one moment could we forget that everything happening elsewhere, on land, at sea, or in the air, depended ultimately on its outcome. The pressure on escort commanders was immense. Do something. But doctrine chained them to defensive positions. Admiralty orders were explicit. Primary duty of escorts is protection of convoy. Counterattacks must not draw escorts beyond supporting distance. The rules made tactical sense. Every destroyer that chased a submarine contact was a destroyer that couldn't protect merchantmen. Aggressive pursuit meant leaving gaps. Borie had chased contacts before. In February, Harwell had pursued a sonar return for 30 miles before losing it in a thermal layer. He'd returned to find the convoy unscathed, but headquarters had sent a terse message. Maintain station discipline. The message was clear. Don't get creative. The compass malfunction presented Harwell with an impossible choice. He could return to station, report the defect, and spend the next week getting the gyro compass recalibrated at some rear base while paperwork documented his equipment failure. Or he could follow the deviation, trust his instincts, and potentially find himself 40 miles from his convoy with nothing to show for it except another stern message from headquarters. His sonar operator, Petty Officer Raymond Malone, hunched over his console in the cramped compartment below the bridge. The hydrophones picked up nothing but wave noise and the throb of Borie's own propellers. No metallic pings, no diesel engine signatures, just ocean. Then Malone's hand froze on the bearing dial. His voice came through the intercom, carefully controlled. Bridge, sonar. Possible contact bearing 285, range 8,000 yards. Classification uncertain. Harwell looked at his compass. The needle pointed straight at it. Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what you know about the North Atlantic Wolfpack battles of 1943. Drop a comment below and let me know if you'd heard about USS Borie's compass malfunction before. And if you're enjoying these deep dives into World War II naval history, hit that subscribe button. These stories take serious research to get the details right, and knowing you're out there makes it all worthwhile. Commander Harwell had seconds to decide. The contact was at the extreme edge of sonar range, barely distinguishing itself from ambient noise. It could be a submarine. It could be a temperature gradient. It could be a school of fish reflecting sound waves in just the right way to fool the hydrophones, but the compass deviation aligned perfectly with the bearing. 285 degrees. Like the ship herself was pointing at something hidden beneath the surface. Come left to 285, Harwell ordered. Increase speed to 20 knots. Sound general quarters. The alarm clanged through every compartment. Men scrambled to battle stations. The depth charge crews on the fantail armed their weapons. 300-pound steel drums packed with Torpex explosive, each set to detonate at a specific depth. The K-gun crews loaded their projectors, ready to hurl charges in a diamond pattern around the target. The forward gun crews cleared for action, though 4-inch shells would be useless against a submerged submarine. Borie heeled into the turn, her elderly hull groaning as she accelerated. Below, in the sonar compartment, Malone adjusted his headphones and listened. The contact strengthened. Diesel engines, definite mechanical signature, range closing to 6,000 yards. Sonar, bridge, classification. Malone's voice was steady now. Bridge, sonar, contact classified submarine. Single screw, bearing steady, range decreasing. She's on the surface, sir. A U-boat on the surface meant vulnerability. Submarines were faster underwater in short bursts, but their electric motors drained batteries quickly. On the surface, they could run diesel engines at 15 knots indefinitely, charging batteries while they moved. But surface-running U-boats were visible to radar and susceptible to gunfire. Harwell grabbed the TBS radio handset, calling the escort commander. Bulldog, this is Badger 2. Have probable submarine contact bearing 285 from my position, range 5 miles, am engaging. Request additional units if available. The reply crackled back. Badger 2, negative. Return to station. Repeat, return to station. Harwell looked at his executive officer. Hutchins met his eyes. The order was clear. The doctrine was clear. Did we copy that transmission, XO? Hutchins allowed himself the ghost of a smile. Radio interference, sir. Solar activity. Couldn't make it out. My assessment as well. Maintain course. Range dropped to 4,000 yards. The fire control team tracked the bearing. The K-gun crews stood ready, hands on the firing levers. Then Malone's voice came through again, higher now. Bridge, sonar. Multiple contacts. Count 3, no, 4. Additional diesel signatures. Bearings 270 through 300. Sir, we've got at least 5 submarines out here. Harwell felt his stomach drop. 5 U-boats. 5 confirmed contacts, which meant there were probably more, submerged and silent, that sonar couldn't detect yet. Borie had stumbled directly into the center of a Wolfpack staging area, the assembly point where submarines gathered before attacking convoys. The tactical mathematics shifted instantly. This wasn't a lone submarine. This was intelligence. If WWII was concentrating here, it meant they were preparing for a coordinated attack, probably against HX-234, probably tonight. Harwell keyed the radio again. Bulldog, this is Badger 2. Confirm 5, repeat, 5, submarine contacts in staging formation. Recommend immediate diversion of convoy course and concentration of all available escorts on this position. This time, headquarters couldn't ignore the transmission. Within 3 minutes, 2 more destroyers detached from the convoy screen and raced toward Borie's position at flank speed. Behind them, the convoy executed an emergency turn, changing course 40 degrees to avoid the Wolfpack's planned intercept point. But that would take an hour. Right now, Borie was alone with 5 U-boats that were about to realize they'd been discovered. Range dropped to 2,000 yards. Harwell could see the first submarine now through his binoculars. A dark gray hull low in the water, conning tower showing, deck gun unmanned. The Germans were running on the surface to charge batteries, confident they were beyond Allied patrol range. Then the U-boat's bridge watch spotted Borie. Alarm bells rang across the water. The German sailors abandoned their cigarettes and scrambled for the hatches. The submarine's diesel note changed pitch as the commander ordered emergency dive procedures. "Target diving," the lookout shouted. Harwell watched the U-boat's stern rise as her bowplanes drove down. 30 seconds to get underwater, 20 seconds before she'd be deep enough to evade depth charges. "Fire control. Compute firing solution for depth charges. Set pattern delta. Depth setting 150 feet. The other 4 submarines were crash diving too, their commanders realizing simultaneously that the hunter had become the prey. Klaxons echoed across the water, the haunting 2-tone alarm that sent U-boat crews racing to diving stations. Borie closed to 500 yards. The first submarine's conning tower disappeared beneath the surface, leaving only a swirl of foam. Harwell tracked the swirl, calculating the submarine's course and dive angle. Stand by, execute. The K-guns fired with sharp cracks, hurling depth charges 150 yards to port and starboard. The stern racks released charges that rolled off the fantail. 8 300-pound bombs arced through the air and splashed into the sea in a diamond pattern around the swirl. The charges sank through the murky water, 50 feet, 100 feet, 150 feet. Inside each drum, a hydrostatic pistol measured water pressure, waiting for the preset depth. Then the ocean erupted. 8 geysers of white water shot 100 feet into the air as the Torpex exploded with 440 pounds of TNT equivalent force. The shock waves raced outward at 5,000 feet per second, compressing water into a hydraulic ram that could crush steel hulls, shatter welds, and rupture ballast tanks. Borie heeled as the shock wave hit her own hull. Harwell gripped the bridge rail and watched. For 5 seconds, nothing. Just foam and turbulence. Then oil, a black slick spreading across the surface, and debris, wood fragments, paper, pieces of cork insulation, and something else, an orange life vest floating in the center of the oil slick. The first kill. Over the next 2 hours, Borie and the 2 reinforcing destroyers methodically hunted the Wolfpack. What naval intelligence discovered from the engagement would reshape anti-submarine doctrine for the remainder of the war. The critical revelation came from radar plots. When operators triangulated the positions of all 5 initial contacts, they found something unexpected. The U-boats weren't randomly scattered. They were arranged in a precise geometric formation, a patrol line spaced exactly 12 kilometers apart, positioned perpendicular to the expected convoy route. The formation was too deliberate to be coincidental. German Wolfpack commanders were staging their submarines with mathematical precision, creating a net that convoys couldn't avoid. The intelligence officers who analyzed the action realized that Borie's compass malfunction had accomplished something active sonar never could. It had found the Wolfpack before the Wolfpack found the convoy. The deviation had led the destroyer directly between two submarines in the patrol line, into the gap where U-boats felt safest from detection. Most critically, the engagement revealed that German submarines were maintaining radio discipline during assembly, but not silence. The diesel signatures that Malone detected indicated that U-boats charged batteries together in designated staging areas, creating acoustic concentrations that sophisticated sonar could detect at ranges beyond 10 kilometers if operators knew what to listen for. Lieutenant Commander Harwell's after-action report documented the tactical breakthrough. Enemy submarines demonstrate predictable assembly patterns prior to convoy attacks. By identifying staging areas through extended-range sonar sweeps and prosecuting contacts aggressively, escort forces can disrupt Wolfpack formations before they achieve striking position. Recommend revision of doctrine to permit offensive patrols beyond convoy screen when multiple contacts indicate staging activity. The recommendation traveled through the chain of command to Commander-in-Chief Atlantic Fleet. Within 3 weeks, new tactical bulletins were distributed to all escort groups. When multiple submarine contacts indicate Wolfpack assembly, designated escorts are authorized to pursue and engage beyond standard patrol limits. Remaining escorts will contract protective screen around convoy. Offensive action against staging concentrations takes precedence over rigid adherence to defensive positions. The doctrinal shift represented a fundamental change in anti-submarine warfare philosophy. Instead of waiting for U-boats to attack, escorts would hunt for their assembly areas. Instead of reacting to threats, they would disrupt them. The mathematics of the tonnage war began to shift. Post-war analysis of German naval records revealed that WWII had been preparing for a coordinated attack on HX-234 scheduled for that evening. 43 submarines were eventually positioned along the convoy route. Borie's engagement disrupted the timing, forced 7 U-boats to break off for emergency repairs or battery charging, and most importantly, revealed the staging area location. Follow-on air patrols sank 3 more submarines in the same area over the next week, and Dönitz was forced to abandon the Meise patrol line entirely. The compass malfunction itself was traced to a damaged gyroscope bearing, the result of depth charge shock during a previous engagement that had gradually thrown the mechanism out of calibration. The deviation wasn't random. It was consistent because the gyroscope was processing true north through a bent bearing that deflected readings by 15 degrees. By pure chance, that 15-degree error pointed directly at the gap in the Wolfpack formation. Engineers couldn't replicate it. The specific damage angle, combined with Borie's course and the magnetic variation at that latitude, had created a deviation that functioned like an unintended direction finder. The British Admiralty's technical assessment concluded the mechanical failure produced an outcome superior to intentional search planning. Probability of random course-intersecting Wolfpack staging area estimated at less than 2%. Attribute result to extraordinary fortune combined with commander's tactical initiative. Fortune favors the bold. But that day, fortune also favored the broken. The immediate results were measurable and significant. Convoy HX-234 reached Britain with 0 losses. All 38 merchant ships delivered their cargoes intact. 2,400 vehicles, 18,000 tons of aviation fuel, 4,200 tons of ammunition, and 63 aircraft. The supplies equipped 2 RAF bomber squadrons and supported Montgomery's preparations for the Sicily invasion. For WWII, the engagement was a tactical disaster. Of the 43 U-boats in the Wolfpack, 11 were sunk during April 1943, 5 were damaged severely enough to require return to base, and the entire patrol line was compromised. Dunitz's war diary entry for April 24th recorded his frustration. Enemy has demonstrated improved ability to locate concentration areas before assembly complete. This suggests either improved detection technology or penetration of communication security. Am ordering dispersal protocols and radio silence during approach phases. Commander Harwell received the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism and distinguished service. The citation specifically praised his tactical initiative in pursuing multiple submarine contacts despite contrary orders, resulting in disruption of enemy Wolfpack and protection of convoy. He continued to command Borie until October 1943, when the destroyer was lost in a close-range engagement with U-405 near the Azores. Harwell survived. 87 of his crew did not. The doctrinal changes implemented after the engagement had far-reaching effects. Escort groups reorganized into hunter-killer formations, with some destroyers assigned specifically to offensive patrols, while others maintained defensive screens. Coordination with long-range aircraft improved as both surface and air assets began targeting staging areas rather than simply reacting to attacks. Sonar operators received training in identifying multiple contacts and distinguishing diesel signatures from other ocean sounds. The kill ratio shifted dramatically. By June 1943, U-boats were losing the tonnage war. 41 submarines were destroyed that month, more than Germany could replace. Dönitz was forced to withdraw from the North Atlantic temporarily, ceding control of the convoy routes for the first time since 1940. Historians credit multiple factors: improved radar, escort carriers, long-range aircraft, and code breaking. But the tactical shift toward offensive engagement, pioneered by commanders like Harwell, who refused to stay passively tied to convoys, was equally crucial. Post-war interviews with surviving German submarine commanders revealed their perspective on the doctrinal change. Korvettenkapitän Peter Kremer, who survived 46 patrols, wrote in his memoir, "In 1943, the character of the battle changed. Allied escorts stopped behaving predictably. They would appear at our assembly points before we were ready. They would chase contacts for hours. They became hunters instead of shepherds. That was when we knew we were losing." The compass itself was removed from Borie during a refit in May 1943 and replaced with a properly calibrated unit. The damaged gyroscope was sent to the Naval Research Laboratory for analysis. Engineers studied the bearing failure, attempting to understand how such a precise malfunction could produce such an advantageous error. They couldn't explain it. Some things in war come down to chance, but chance only matters when commanders have the courage to follow where it leads. The Battle of the Atlantic was won by many factors: technology, intelligence, industrial capacity, and the courage of merchant seamen who kept sailing despite impossible odds. But it was also won by junior officers who understood that doctrine is a guide, not a cage. That sometimes the right decision is the one that disobeys standing orders. That sometimes a broken compass points more truly than a functional one. Commander Harwell couldn't have known his gyroscope was damaged. He couldn't have known a Wolfpack was assembling exactly where the deviation pointed. He couldn't have known that following his instincts would save 38 ships and reshape anti-submarine tactics for the rest of the war. But he knew that something was pulling his ship toward danger, and he chose to follow. The Germans spent years perfecting Wolfpack tactics, believing that mathematics and discipline would win the tonnage war. The British spent years developing sonar and radar, believing that technology would detect submarines before they attacked. Both were partly right, but both underestimated the human factor, the commander willing to trust intuition over instruments, initiative over orders. One malfunctioning compass, 5 submarines discovered. one convoy saved, one doctrine changed. Sometimes victory doesn't come from superior technology or flawless planning. Sometimes it comes from a broken instrument and a commander who understood that in war, the greatest danger is the opportunity you don't pursue. The broken compass led to the hidden Wolfpack, but it was the man following it who made the difference. If you found this story as fascinating as I did researching it, I'd appreciate if you'd like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are dozens more untold stories from World War II that deserve to be remembered, and I'll be bringing you a new one every week. What should I cover next? Let me know in the comments below. Nah,